KLDR Online, Leadership Development Radio.
Thank you for joining the Maverick Paradox. And now, here is your host, Judith Germain.
Welcome to the Maverick Paradox at KLDR, where we recognize that effective Maverick leaders are known for their divergent thinking and ability to execute well. Each week, we explore Maverick leadership in all its guises, exploring what it is to be an effective Maverick leader with experts in diverse fields. Today, I'm joined by Rajan Shankara, who has been trained in one of the world's foremost meditation institutions for over a decade. Rajan studied theology, philosophy, and psychology, while surrounded by renowned experts on the mind, body, and fluid intelligence. He has helped edit and publish some of Hinduism's oldest scriptures on health, balance, and culture, and has performed religious ceremony for thousands of devotees and helped build America's only hand-carved all-granite temples in Hawaii. Rajan has mentored over 1,000 individuals, is an author of 4 books, non-profit founder, and father. He currently helps NASA with project coordination in advanced air mobility. Wow. Now that's some introduction.
Thank you.
So welcome, Rajan. Tell us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, that's great. What makes you a Maverick leader?
Good question. Well, I'm used to the question, what makes a Maverick leader? But me, well, I guess I've been promoted enough to know that I have leadership qualities. So I hope people that I work with would agree. But I think what makes me a Maverick leader is I don't go with face value things because we as an organization in our history has been doing something for this amount of time. That doesn't really mean anything to me. I'm usually not convinced by most people or systems until I see that they're actually efficient and doesn't kill the people on the team. If those aren't met, I'm not satisfied and I speak up about it. So maybe I'm kind of stubborn and I also am vocal about when I see things that are just not going well. And I don't think a lot of people do that.
No. Do you think a lot of that comes from your value set or your principles?
Sure. I'm not scared of anyone. I'm not scared of saying something and offending someone. I know how to say something where I wouldn't offend someone. But I think a lot of people don't know how to do that. And so they're not confident in their own ability to speak. And so when they say something, they're not sure if it came out right. But there are ways to approach leadership with potentially rude and offensive remarks in a very eloquent way that lets them know that you're dissatisfied with the way they do things.
So go on then. How do you do that?
Well, it helps to know the person personally and not just professionally. So I don't recommend voicing your opinions early on in a relationship, in a professional relationship. I think you have to really get to people past the professional environment before that will be accepted. And you have to put work in, as they say. They used to say that when we would deal drugs a long time ago. You have to put work in before you can really, be noticed. And if you're putting in work, then you have some ground to start speaking. But if you're new or you're not involved in the sweat equity of the team, no one's going to pay attention really to what you're saying. So that's a good start. Spending time with the team, even in an unfortunate situation, before speaking up and saying, "Hey, you're doing this wrong," you can then say, "I've been in this situation with the team and it's not being done correctly."
Cool. Thanks for that. So can you share your leadership journey?
So I've always been an all or nothing type person. And so I've always been in a type of founder or CEO role. When I was, I think, 16 or 17, I started a company, an asphalt company with a friend of mine. So right off the bat, we were talking to clients and being paid and managing assets of a company. So leadership never really came into question. That wasn't a thing back then. It was just, this is what you do. Again, this is how you put it in work, and people will respect you for that. So that's kind of been, I guess that's work ethic. For me, it came naturally. And the education didn't come until I became a monk and was on a team of 5 people for 7 years as a subordinate, working my way through different ranks. That was different. So it was one thing to be the founder of an asphalt company and managing all the operations and all the jobs and all the accounting and everything. Then there's another thing to work on a team where roles and responsibilities are divided, and you don't have to do everything, and you don't have to speak on everything or worry about everything. That was very hard for me. So I would see something happening on part of the team and speak up, and they would say, "Can we help you with this? This is not something that you should be concerned with. So back off." And I would easily offend people. So me as a leader really it has developed through a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of stepping on people and offending people. And because I didn't know always how to speak eloquently or sensitively, but get a point across. I just wanted to get the point across and be right. So essentially, I learned that you don't have to be right. Even as a leader, you don't have to be right. And maybe if you start to get into servant leadership, which I studied some years ago, the less right you are, the better. Maybe, I don't know. But if other people, like if you can make other people right and somehow be their support system, I think that really is where I tend to shine.
I love that. And what you describe is so common with Mavericks, that you tend to upset people along the way with not really knowing how. So how did you learn to stop doing that?
Right. Language. Just starting out by saying a few different words. I think I learned this from one of my mentors in Hawaii, which was, you already know this. Just starting off by saying, you already know this, and I'm already disarmed. So language was very important in my monastic training and working with people around the world on extremely valuable projects where a lot could be go to waste. And when you deal with creators and strong-headed artistic people and things like that, which we were around a lot, you have to give them a disarming vocal anchor so that the next things that come out of your mouth are welcomed I think that's huge. If what you're about to say is not welcome, then it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. It doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter if you're even in charge. If no one wants to hear it, they're not going to give you the time of the day. And so you're really losing a long, long war there.
It's really interesting. Do you think it's about the leader not having their own ego to deal with? Do you think that helps?
Yeah. I mean, ego is huge, right? Ego is the sense of I amness that doesn't really include anyone else, and it's a self-sustaining and self-creating mechanism. It saves face. It survives at the end of the day. That's what its goal is. It's not we survive. It's I survive. And however that happens, that's how it happened. So diminishing ego and encompassing the team aspect, I think, in life, even if you have never been, for example, in a team or in an athletic position with a team, you want to pretend that you are on some sort of team. And I recommend that for everyone at all times, even when you're driving a car, you're like on the same team as everyone else going in your direction.
I imagine that's not easy for a lot of people, because the culture, certainly in the West, isn't really designed to have that greater good philosophy, is it?
No, I think what happens here is we become headstrong in university, and there's the fear of speaking out. That's the one part of it, and because of lack of speech capacity. And the other thing is just in the West, it's hard to be noticed, I think, if you're wrong. And everyone wants to be noticed by their superior. And I've noticed, especially at NASA, time and efficiency are two major factors in every project. And if you stick your neck out, or if you do too much for other people on the team, it can possibly ruin your chances of succeeding at your own project. Or the own aspect of your project. So it's you have to really manage it carefully. And so I don't always recommend that people think of this team aspect 24/7. What I recommend is when you can take this philosophy to heart, but there are times when you do need to kind of work alone, stand alone, produce your own results, and let the team speak for itself when the time comes, when the project is over. But not necessarily, you can still do these leadership tactics outside of the project, but at work. So maybe you're not in that team environment right now. You can still approach people on Slack, for example, or message people or call people and talk to them offline.
I see.
As we say, and then get to that personal side of someone without bringing the team aspect into it. And then it's like you're both working side by side, but separately. The project is over. And while you may not have really risked your own work for someone else, you've at least been a support system, and they will remember that, even if the professional side was not a factor. Does that make sense? I know that was a lot.
Yeah, it does. It's such a shame. It reminds me of many, many years ago, and I was definitely doing that leader thing where we succeeded and I made the mistake, so I was always promoting people in the team in terms of, look at what great job Rajan did, and I made a mistake. But that what happened was, I remember one of the MDs at the time saying, but Jude, what is it that you're doing?
Right.
Because your team's doing all of this. And
right.
when it goes wrong, it's your fault. And I was like, what? That's just
Right.
me promoting the team. That's ridiculous. And it was such a shock for me at that time, because I thought, isn't that what everyone's doing?
Yeah.
And it wasn't.
Yeah. And when it comes down to it, not everyone else will necessarily speak up because, they're focused on doing their work. So I made that mistake at NASA early on a project last year. I was so focused on kind of supporting everyone else that my own work started to decline. And in those team meetings, when I needed to produce something, no one else was really there. They were like, we're focused on doing our work. And so you do have to have a certain sense of ego. You have to have some of that, some selfishness. You have to remain an individual regardless. But it's a balancing act. And that's kind of, that's why not everyone can do it successfully. Most people are usually just the professional individual. It's very rare that you have the team player and the individual at the same time.
It's really difficult. And it must feel a bit strange, because you're quite a collegiate type of individual, aren't you? And working or being in the monastery for that period of time must have taught you to work well with other people. So it must have been a strange thing for you.
Yes. Yeah, it was, but I realized very quickly, like any good speaker kind of recognizes their audience, I recognized the team dynamics that I was trying to force. You don't want to jump into a team and try to force a new culture, especially if you're not in a leadership role at the time. You have to be very careful with that. So you can be a go-getter, a team player and supporter. But if everyone on the team who's been there longer than you is set in their ways, this is where the individual kind of shines. You stick to yourself, keep your head down for a little while, but in the background, support people, get to know them personally. And that's kind of the dirty work of putting in the work is. That's that phase. And then it's weird. After everyone kind of knows you personally, the professional side comes naturally. The promotions come naturally. The recommendations. Well, Raj, what about Raj? He's kind of set up for this. He would be a good role for that. It's the personal side of connecting with people that no one really sees as a professional lens, in a professional lens, that is a deep part of the professional work.
Yeah, that's a good tip and one worth sharing. So thank you for that, Raj. And I think it's time for a break now. When we return, we will talk about leadership lessons learned from a warrior monk.
The Maverick Paradox magazine. The Maverick Paradox magazine is for the pathologically curious. Written by a swagger of socialized mavericks who are divergent thinkers, the magazine tackles the biggest issues affecting maverick leaders today. You might be a business owner or a leader within an organization who wants to have your thinking challenged, to be exposed to a diversity of thought, or to learn from diverse experts in their fields. If so, the Maverick Paradox magazine is for you. Join the swagger at themaverickparadox.com and engage in the conversation.
Thank you for joining the Maverick Paradox at KLDR, where we explore maverick leadership in all its guises. This is the station for the pathologically curious who want to be challenged by divergent thinkers. I am your host, Judith Germain, and today I'm joined by Rajan Shankara. So, Rajan, your new book has a very provocative title. It's called Everything is Your Fault. I really need to know more about that.
Right. So Everything is Your Fault is a responsibility philosophy. It focuses on the individual being responsible for everything, or as much as they can. And then you see where life takes you, not trying to force anything, but just trying to be responsible. And the idea is there that if you take on responsibility for something in your life, you now have the power to manipulate it or change it as you see fit. If you're waiting for someone else, and this is professional and personal, if you're waiting for someone else, if you're blaming someone else, if it's someone else's fault, then you are essentially out of control until the other person allows you to start acting. So we want to shift the power dynamic back to us for the good things and the bad things. Very challenging to do, but worthwhile.
So it's really about personal accountability that you hold.
Yeah.
Is that right?
It also it's lessons learned along my 12-year monastic journey. So I didn't want to write just a pure autobiographical account of myself. I wanted to include gems of wisdom, I guess, or pieces of advice that I can give out, and that I do give out to clients and students. And it came about because a student requested that I write the book after 8 months of after 8 months of personal training with me. She really requested it for everyone else who wouldn't have that experience. And I thought it was a good point, and decided that if the words kind of came to me, then I would write it. And sure enough, they did, in the idea that I would split the book into autobiography and teaching.
What's interesting, I think, by your title is that some people might assume that it's a book about blaming yourself for everything that's going wrong in your life, which is not what I'm sensing from your saying. I'm sensing it as a book of strength, really, by saying, if everything is down to you, you have the power to change or to be whoever you want to be. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's a catchy, kind of cheeky title, but
I love it.
You can't take everything. You can't blame yourself for everything. You can't. It's not logical to do that, especially with serious tragedies and horrific abuses that may have happened in one's life. You have to take responsibility for what happens after the fact. You have to take responsibility for your future, not necessarily your past. But one thing is true: we do need to stop living in the past. We need to put that aside, and especially victims of trauma, we need to rewrite the script. And the idea is to rewrite our script and move forward without being reminded of the past, without using the past too much as an excuse, I think, for a miserable present moment, which is not acceptable.
And that's another tightrope, isn't it, between looking at it as this is a really powerful concept, and this is an excuse for everything that's gone wrong in my life. And I can imagine when people are working with you, you'll get that sorted with no problems. But I imagine as the person's going through your book, maybe they might be like, yeah, but it is my fault. I didn't study, or I didn't do this. Where it's not. I think this is almost like a hooray, isn't it? Saying, you know what, it's all down to you. And that in itself is really powerful.
Yeah. The idea is maybe something in the past is truly your fault. But, being absorbed in it is useless. My guru used to say, with anger and frustration, they're absolutely useless states of being. They have no advantage. You get no advantage from becoming angry, almost most of the time. Maybe there's an argument for passion, but passion, it doesn't necessarily need to be anger. And so if something is of no advantage to you, it's time to throw it away and move on. And so I recommend a bit of like mental minimalism, where your mind really doesn't hold that much, and you're more open to the present moment and opportunities coming at you instead of reliving the past, which, just like leadership, is very difficult for people to do because they identify with their past. We don't want to identify so much with our past. We want to be more spontaneous.
I have noticed that a lot of people can struggle because their brain, it's just too much noise in their head, too many voices that aren't serving. So if we look at self-leadership then as a foundational piece for Maverick Leadership, because leadership starts with you and then you push it out, I'm curious, did your love of Jiu-jitsu fuel your need or passion for self-leadership?
I've never actually thought about that. But I remember the first time we did a show, I was constantly like, wow, no one's ever asked me that.
It's my Maverick thinking, that's what it is.
Yeah, jiu-jitsu is absolutely self-management, 100%. It's everything you do, reactionary based, can be controlled. And if you end up getting into a submission in jiu-jitsu, which is basically a painful situation, you got yourself there. You can always, and that's the fascination behind it. How did I get myself here? And it happens so fast. It's very difficult. It's such a challenge, art. It's such a challenging art, which is why it fascinates me. It's rare that I do something that I cannot wrap my mind around. And jiu-jitsu, I can tell you maybe more about it in maybe 10 or 20 years.
Because what I find fascinating about jiu-jitsu is the self-control, because it's about controlling the situation with the least amount of strength possible.
100%. Yes.
So the other person can walk away. So it's not one of those arts where you go for the brute force, break an arm and all that kind of stuff. It's just, if I can hold you still by pressing on a point with my little finger, then that's way better than breaking your arm, because when you've controlled and you've calmed down, you can walk off whole. I have not hurt you. I have just restrained you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, precisely. And even when you're in a worse position in jiu-jitsu, if you're calm enough and present enough and aware of every part of the body, you can easily reverse the situation and be in a much better position and be the one winning. If you just hold on to the present moment, because chances are the person is actually doing something wrong. But if you're too stressed or worried, you will only feel an immediate reaction to the pressure on a, let's say, a major part of your body, like your neck or something. But you forgot that their knee is exposed, and you can simply manipulate it somehow and move them. And so that's a wonderful part of jiu-jitsu. And so it teaches you that self-restraint. So same thing with living our life. If you're in an argument with someone and you get too heated, your points will start breaking down. You won't even make sense, and you'll just get emotional. And so emotion, it's really a self-regulatory martial art where you keep emotions at bay, and things go much better for you, even if you're not that good.
Yeah, actually, the correlation with that and normal leadership is that kind of it's kind of that kind of control it so that you're noticing cues, isn't it? Because as you said, like if you're trying to lead somebody and you're all emotional about it, then you could miss the other person submitting, the other person agreeing with you. I mean, how many times have you been in a conversation when you say, we're violently agreeing? We're just using different words, but we are actually in agreement. But the other person's so emotional, they can't even hear that you are, or the other person's in fact in agreement with them. And that's the same with jiu-jitsu, isn't it? It's like if you're so emotional about it and you've gone in heavy, then you're more likely to hurt the person and missing the cue of the tap, the submission.
Yeah. I mean, most of the time in a professional setting, no one cares too deeply about things that you've missed. And if you get wrapped up over them, I've noticed that people are forced to kind of relive your inadequacies. But if you accept it and move on, people are more than willing to also do the same. And so it's an ego thing. It comes back to ego. It comes back to humility. Humility is huge. Accepting when things have gone wrong is one of the best leadership tactics there is, probably.
And it's a bit like any martial arts as well, isn't it? Where 1 second you're the teacher and the other second you're the student. And it's like a circle, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth the whole time, and it's completely natural.
Yes, that's very true. That's very true.
So what can organizations learn from your journey, your leadership journey?
I think if you have a leader who is always right, if you have a leader who is always front and center, you're headed down a destructive path where everything is dependent on this one person, and they'll eventually burn themselves out or miss something so critical, because not everyone is that good. People need other people in professional teams, and it's important to highlight other people in the process and empower other people in the process, so that a leader doesn't actually have to be the one revolutionizing everything. The leader just empowers people to revolutionize everything. And I mean, really, I think a leader is a support system. That's what I've learned over the last decade plus. And a leader who needs to learn everything and needs to do everything themselves is you just can't rely on that. It's not a safe bet. It's almost like a house of cards.
I love that. A leader is a support system. I've never heard anyone say that before, and that just makes perfect sense. So Wonderful. Thank you for that.
Sure.
When we return from our break, Rajan will have a couple of questions for me. So I'm going to be interested to see what he has to ask.
Judith Germain is the leading authority on Maverick Leadership, an author, speaker, consultant, mentor, and trainer. She is the founder of the Maverick Paradox, specializing in Maverick leadership and enabling individuals, business owners, and organizations to improve their impact and influence. She is also HR Zone's leadership columnist, and her expert opinion has appeared in national, international, and trade press. The Maverick Paradox supports organizations to enhance their leadership capability and business owners to develop and grow their business. Judith is a business mentor and chartered fellow of the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, with over 20 years senior, strategic and operational experience in HR. She's also the editor and founder of the Maverick Paradox and can be found at maverickparadox.co.uk and the Maverick Paradox magazine at themaverickparadox.com.
Thank you for coming back to the Maverick Paradox at KLDR, where we stoke your curiosity on all things Maverick. So Rajan. What questions do you have for me?
Okay, I did think of some. All right. Since I work with young people a lot, I wanted to ask you about young people. So any tips you would give university students to start their Maverick journey and start their leadership muscles to get growing? What would you tell a young person in today's world?
Wow, what a great question. What would I say? I think know who you are. So spend some time actually discovering who you are and not worry about your peers and what the last YouTube or TikTok influencer is up to. Discover yourself. Go into areas that you're not comfortable in. So, read something, read the opposite. It's like when you do a debate and sometimes you have to debate a position that you don't care for.
Yes.
Go and do that. Get your muscle, your contrary muscle working. Be comfortable with saying no and not apologizing for saying no. Just no. So that's what I would do is discover you and your boundaries and expose yourself. I suppose, especially when you've come out from the school system, expose yourself to areas where you don't agree, but you're actually challenged to think differently and to do your research and come up with your own opinion. I think that probably would be the first place I would start for someone straight out of university.
Fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. Yeah. Self-discovery is, I'm so glad you said that. That's beautiful. Yeah. With someone who says no and then defends all the reasons why they said no, it almost cancels out the power in the no.
Yeah. Weakens it. But it's not as if you're going, no. You're just like, no. Can you do this? No. I think what that teaches you is that it's a bit like the conversation on consent, isn't it? Where you say to children, when you're teaching children about their bodies, other people's bodies, you say, it's your body, so you can say no. If you don't want anyone to give you a kiss, don't want to hug the uncle, then just say no. And it's the same anything else, is that we are conditioned to conform from a very early age, and it's a dangerous habit to get into, because real leadership isn't about conforming, is it? Leadership is about trying to figure out what's the right thing to do based on a shifting, complex world that we're in. And compliance is hardly ever the right answer.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And it's really teaching someone to respect their own time and to respect, their ability. Especially when I work with clients, it's when I say my prices, and some people are like, well, I don't understand that. It's like, well, that's how much I value my time. So if you want to take my time, that's what it costs. Because if I wasn't with you, the other things I would be doing would be so valuable. And I think it also values the client's time as well. What do you think is the worst thing about being a Maverick leader?
Oh, good one. You're tough. Let me see the worst thing. Oh, okay. I'm going to look at it from two perspectives. So if you are an extreme Maverick leader, the worst thing is caring so much about yourself that you don't care about other people. You don't care how you hurt them or how much manipulation that you've used to get your own way. I think if you're a socialized Maverick leader, an effective Maverick leader, I think the worst thing, and I have certainly been guilty over this, especially at a younger age, is caring so much about the situation that you're trying to resolve. In fact, caring so much more than the person that has the problem, that you get so invested in solving it that it causes problems. because the other person doesn't care as much as you. So they think you're being too enthusiastic or too aggressive when you're just trying to help them solve it, but they don't really care as much as you do. So I would carry home the hurt of that because I felt very misunderstood and sort of misaligned. And it would really bother me. And I'd be very, very hurt about it. And I had to learn to care as much as the other person. And that's not the same about, specifically when you're employed as well, I think. Because companies have an annoying habit of saying, this is what's important to us. And it isn't that thing. It's something else that they haven't said. So then you end up causing a lot of problems when you're trying to fight towards the thing they say that they care about, and then it's not that thing. Yep.
No, that makes sense. And that, I think along the same lines is what I thought about with that question was, you make yourself so different and unique, it's hard to relate to other people.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people are just 9-to-5ers. They clock in, they clock out, and they keep to their routine and their schedule, which is wonderful. But thinking outside the box really forces you into a smaller minority of people.
Yeah.
Harder for me to just become friends with anyone, have a normal conversation, because I look too multidimensionally beyond things. And I remember when I left the monastery, it was hard to watch movies that were unrealistic. Like I remember Star Wars, for example. After my training in the monastery, I just could not think fantastically about things like that. It was just too whimsical. But thankfully, I've kind of softened up a bit over the years since I've been out.
You know what I think it is as well is that Mavericks are so curious about things. Spend a lot of time researching stuff just for the hell of it, because one day they had a thought about something and didn't know the answer. So then they end up spending like 4 weeks rehearsing. So now I understand why this happened. But what that means is when somebody could be randomly passing a day about something, and then that triggers a memory of the reason why. So then you end up going into a lot of depth about something that nobody really wants to hear about.
No.
And you're like, oh, and then you realise that, okay, maybe I overspoke there. But you just suddenly got so excited and passionate about the thing that you just went all in. Is that what you're saying as well?
That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean,
because you just love, because everything is wonderfully interesting. So somebody has to say something and you don't know anything about it. You're like, wow, tell me more. And then it's like, oh, that reminds me of this. Is it a bit like when that happens and when that happens? And that's when you have to check your passion sometimes, because you end up coming across a little bit weird sometimes.
Yeah, it's strong and you can bore people with things. I mean, I remember when I got into the stock market and cryptocurrencies, and I wanted to learn everything there was to learn about it. And if you're not careful, 2 hours can go by in a conversation, and I won't have let up because I'm so fascinated with the subject. So do not pretend fascination and ask a question about something with an analytical thinker, because they'll tell you all about the thing. I want to know more.
So I guess the learning there then that we're both kind of agreeing with there is to check your passion to make sure you've reached another enthusiast before you lay out everything you know about the subject, because it's just so fascinating.
Yeah. Better to not say anything sometimes in a group of people. Just know the group first, know the audience before saying something.
Do you think that's an age thing? Do you think it's like you grow out? Because because I think about what I was like when I was a lot younger or very new into management, where you misunderstand things. When somebody asks a question, you think you should, I guess you just think you should tell everybody everything. And,
absolutely.
Or if it doesn't make sense, then you just say, no, Raj, that doesn't make any sense. And then people would get upset and you wouldn't understand why. But then you kind of learn and grow out of it and you don't make those mistakes anymore. So do you think it's an age thing? Or do you think Mavericks have to really work hard at it?
Well, because with age, with young people, there's naive, you think that everyone is kind of interested in what you're interested in. And it takes a while, but the world will slowly break you down and show you that not everyone is interested in all those dumb things. And
when you think about it, though, I suppose as a kid, when you're growing up, everyone is interested because everyone's interested to hear what the kids have got to say, isn't it? And so it seems actually natural.
We're conditioned. We're just conditioned.
Actually, you know what's interesting about this conversation is that recognition that you just get better as you get more experience. It's not necessarily an age thing, it's just more experience. And I think sometimes people look at Maverick leaders and say, you have everything. It's almost like you came out of this box or you picked up a box of leadership and then you just got it. And people don't realise that, yes, you made mistakes and sometimes horrendous mistakes, but you learned from that.
Oh, yeah. It's built on a road paved with awful experiences and long arguments and conversations with superiors about everything you're doing wrong. And I know I can see all of mine in front of me and
behind you.
But yeah, right. I can see them in my mind as if they were like yesterday. And, I'm so grateful for those experiences. Gosh, I'll never forget the first time one of the monks sat me down and just drove into me about everything I was doing that was wrong. It was the first insight into my own narcissism at the time. And I was an absolute monster. And without someone so courageous, I wouldn't have had my own ignorance revealed to me. And so the monk who first sat me down, and then the monks who sat me down for the years after, truly helped me become who I am today. So you need courageous people around you who are willing to speak the truth. I guess in order to be a leader and a good socialized maverick, you need to be surrounded by mavericks.
Oh, that is so true, because I had a similar experience in the sense of somebody brave enough to sit me down and saying no. And that was another maverick. That was like my first real boss, a socialized maverick, who made a point of saying, it's not enough to be knowledgeable in the subject. It's not enough to be academic. It's not enough to be smart at something. There's a human dimension.
Yeah.
And I think, especially young mavericks, is that you think the whole world is going to be how you are, because you don't know any different. So if you value brutal honesty, if you're rubbish, somebody says you're rubbish, and that's very clear. Okay, I'm rubbish, now what? Yeah. But you don't realise that you may value feedback like that, but pretty much nobody else does.
Right. No, that pushes people away. It's the people who are natural leaders who are like, okay, give me more. Like, how can I improve on this? What's the next thing? Demanding performance reviews that, the monks would say, give me more. They would treat them like arrows. There's a story in the monks' lineage about someone who was a guru who was being arrowed by his followers, and he was just accepting it. And he was like, well, this is just what's supposed to happen. And so we would use that arrow concept when regarding corrections in the monastery. And just let them come, open yourself up to them, and you will get better. So long as leadership does not take away privilege based on mistakes. And that's another failing of an organization. It's when the leader removes privilege from the subordinate for making a mistake. Now you're in an environment where you're not allowed to make mistakes. And then you're going to have infighting, backbiting. It's going to be every man for himself. And it's no one wants that situation. So I think it's clear in, I think, most progressive corporations and companies and organizations today that mistakes happen. We learn from them, and we train. We emphasize training to prevent major miscalculations. But mistakes happen, and you're still nothing's going to happen to you. You still have your position, and we all learn from this. And you write up a report and everything, and have a meeting on how to not have the same thing happen again. But no one is demoted or anything.
Yeah, that's so important, because if people can come to you with the smallest of mistake and know that they're still welcome, then they're not going to be frightened with the big mistakes. And a bit like your book, as a leader, it's your fault anyway. So if there's been this huge cock up, did you actually check the person knew what they were doing?
Right.
Did you delegate properly? Did you make sure they were trained enough? Or did you just turn around and say, I'm too busy, you get on with it?
Right.
So it's your fault. It's all your fault.
That's right.
It's got a good book you've got there, I could tell. So, Raj, thanks for those questions. They really made me think.
Oh, sure.
Pause and go, So let me ask you one then. So you have shared so much so far already, but what would you share now in terms of leadership lessons for the audience? What could they take away from you?
I think the biggest thing is there's always recognize that there was some point in your process where you made a mistake, and that's a way to take responsibility. What comes to mind is just one of my students is a CEO of a company, and they hired a subcontractor, and the person was not effective, and things were going wrong, and they were wasting money. And not once in his talk with me did he ever reflect on who hired the subcontractor. And I had to actually say, I can't believe I'm saying this, but who hired the person? And he said, well, I did. And I said, well, you're an idiot.
No, that's Maverick.
You shouldn't have hired such a bad person. Shame on you. And there's no one there in his position because of where he is in the company. There's no one there to say that. And everyone just has to deal with everything by working overtime. But that's where the biggest mistake of the entire project happened, is he allowed someone like that to work for his company and to lower the standards. And so in a situation where nothing could possibly be your mistake or fault, lo and behold, there's a crucial point somewhere in the way where you could have done something better, or you could have been more aware, as you were saying. You could have been more observant, more mindful, more present, more inquisitive, but you weren't. And that's
all your fault.
Yeah, and that's your fault. And it's something to be aware of. And you could say that with leadership and relationships, everything. If things aren't going wrong, that's a hard one for people in relationships. Things aren't going wrong in the relationship. Well, what did you do to attract this person? Because there's that law of attraction that we cannot go without anymore. It's 2021. We all know the law of attraction is real. And the universe is this big magnetic function, and you are pulling people or pushing opportunities away from you. And once you wrap your head around that, you can kind of create your own reality. And I recommend that.
Yeah, the world's a magnet. And I think it's really important to stress that when we say it's all your fault, it's not an accusationary, it's almost it's a bit of a maverick smirk in a way, isn't it? In the sense of there's a recognition that we are in control of the things that we allow to happen.
Yeah, the word that comes to mind for me is liberation. Yeah, you are now liberated with the knowledge that everything is your fault. Take it for what it is, and learn from what you can. And if you learn just the right message, you can really go far in life. And I think that's one of them. It's not everything, but it's definitely a key one. It was for me.
I love that. That's really, really good. Just a reminder that you can't delegate, accountability. You're accountable. Right. No, you it's just, and it's one of the hardest things to take on, because you have to admit that you were wrong, and that you're possibly not as good of a person as you thought. Yeah, and that's hard, isn't it? It's that kind of conscious.
Devastating.
Yeah, it's that conscious dissonance when you sit there and go, you know what? I'm not as great as I thought I was.
Right. You have to stop making excuses for all of these falsehoods. It's cognitive dissonance is so rampant, and I can only say that because I have it firsthand. I had it firsthand, and when I was younger, and I hope to this day that I regularly check myself, and I regularly self-reflect and try to start again, from in my mind, what did I do wrong here? How could this have been better? And with everything that I do, and that's possibly why a leader's mind can be somewhat prone to depression, but you're literally trying to take on as much as possible all the time. So how can I do that in this situation, whatever it may be? And it's tough, but it's worthwhile. It's better than the easy path, in my opinion. I'd much rather take on a path of burden, because that's why I believe that, we're born and we're here on this earth. It's so full of challenges. So who can take on the most challenges? And maybe that's another leadership.
Yeah, you'll have to come back and talk about that. Because, it's a great reminder that, all good leaders are for self-reflection and learning from that self-reflection.
Yeah.
Thank you, Raj. That was just so great. What a fantastic conversation. And thank you for listening to the Maverick Paradox at KLDR, where we recognise that effective Maverick leaders are known for their divergent thinking and ability to execute well. I am your host, Judith Germain, and we've been joined by Rajan Shankara, former monk, consciousness architect. You can find out more about Raj on his website, Rajan Shankara, which is RajanShankara.com, or follow his podcast, Man in the Making, on Spotify. I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you for joining the Maverick Paradox.
Only on KLDR Online, Leadership Development Radio.
You can follow Judith on her fan page at Judith Germain.